people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest on what is supposed to be the Baumgardner versus Delphine Persoon fight, set to go down August 10th in San Jose. Which San Jose exactly, I'm not sure, as there is more than one. It was in March of this year when the Global Combat Collective beat out Matchroom with a winning bid of $500,000 for the rights to this fight. But I have no knowledge of the Global Combat Collective, who they are, who runs them. What broadcast partner, if any, do they have in order to air this fight? Because they paid a pretty penny, more than Matchroom, to win the rights to it. We're about 6 to 7 weeks out from what is intended to be the official fight date, but no official announcement has actually been made. And they won the rights to this thing way back there in March. How much time has to pass before the Global Combat Collective is found in default and the rights to the fight go to the second highest bidder, which in this situation would be Matchroom, because that's what happened when Triller won the rights to the Lopez versus Cambosos fight, but it was taking them too long to make it happen. They were found in default, they lost their deposit, and the rights to the fight went to the second highest bidder. I'm starting to wonder if that's what's going to happen with this fight, with this situation, because there hasn't been an official announcement, there hasn't been an official fight poster. The only reason we even know about when they plan on doing it is because of the WBA's website. I'm starting to wonder if they're not going to end up defaulting the rights to Matchroom. I'm starting to wonder if it wouldn't have been better if Matchroom would have won the rights to the fight, because they would have got it done by now. Granted that they didn't put up as much money as the Global Combat Collective for the fighters, though given the amount of time the fighters are losing on this thing, is it worth it for a few more dollars? That's saying that if the fight date actually sticks, and they do this thing in August, it will have taken them 8 months to get Alicia out there. And the Global Combat Collective, I mean, they don't have Alicia under contract, so why would you pay so much for a fighter that isn't signed to you? Doesn't make a lot of sense. For what is a fledgling promotional outfit with no ties to a major broadcaster, no DAZN, no ESPN, no Amazon, to pay in excess of what Matchroom paid for the show for what is their fighter, you paid more than they did. She's still under contract with Matchroom. When the show is done, she goes back to them. Just doesn't make sense. This will be Alicia Baumgardner's first fight since her anti-doping fiasco last year after the Christina Linardatu rematch. She was cleared. You know, she didn't get suspended. She didn't get stripped. She didn't lose nothing but time, because in spite of being cleared, it's still taking a long time to get her back out there. It's taken a long time for Delphine Persoon, too, who is several years older than Alicia Baumgardner. I believe that Delphine is now in her 40s or close to them. She's waiting for the opportunity, understandably so. At her age, this is one of the few instances where she'll get the chance to fight for all the marbles, all the belts at a given weight. If the date sticks, it will have been roughly a year's time, a little over a year, since Alicia last saw action. The Linardatu rematch, that was back there in July of this year. This fight is supposed to be going down in August of this one. So even though she didn't actually get suspended, she's still losing a lot of time. Where Delphine, she has seen action more recently than Alicia. She has seen action in the last 12 months. She was last in action in November of last year, late last year. Though she's not getting any younger, and because she's not getting any younger, this needs to happen now. No. Just the latest on what is supposed to be Baumgardner versus Persoon. It's supposed to go down in August in the absence of an official announcement, an official fight poster, broadcast information. It's supposed to go down in August. We'll see if it does. In men's super flyweight news, on the heels of Bam Rodriguez's big win over Gallo Estrada this weekend, the people at Ring Magazine have gone ahead and ranked him in the top 5 of their current pound-for-pound list. Bam gained some ground on my list too. He moved from number 9 up to number 8, whereas the jump on Ring Magazine's list is a lot more dramatic. But is it warranted?
Top 5, just like that.
For beating that version of Gallo Estrada, a version of that fighter that is in his mid-30s and had not fought in over a year's time. That gets you a top 5 spot on Ring Magazine's pound-for-pound list. It feels like a knee-jerk reaction to me. They're overshooting it.
How so?
There is a current reigning multi-weight champion at that same weight alongside Bam Rodriguez, who's been around a lot longer and has been competing at this level a lot longer than Bam Rodriguez has. 4-division champion Kazuto Ioka of Japan, who is criminally underrated, I think.
He's not even on the list.
But he has been a more active fighter in the last 12 months, the last 2 years, just more active overall than Gallo Estrada has been, and they've been champions at the same weight.
Kazuto Ioka has been a champion at 4 weights, where Gallo has only been a champion in 2, and the same applies to Bam Rodriguez. He's only been a champion at 2 weights.
So is it sensible and sensical that Bam gets a top 5 rank for beating that version of Gallo, and Kazuto Ioka gets no rank at all?
He's going to be in action this weekend in a unification match at this same weight against unbeaten Fernando Martinez. If he wins, are they even going to rank him?
If he wins. Now, if he loses...
well, that's another story.
The basic idea here is that while I think that Bam Rodriguez is one of the best fighters in the world and in the sport right now, I don't yet think he's earned a top 5 rank for beating that version of Gallo Estrada, and in a very general sense, it's good that he's a 2-division champion that has beaten 2 champions and taken their belts from them. Unbeaten Sonny Edwards for the IBF title at flyweight, more recently Gallo Estrada for the WBC title at super flyweight, but that by itself...
I wouldn't rate him ahead of Vasyl Lomachenko or Teofimo Lopez on that premise, not yet. It's too soon.
Vasyl Lomachenko has been a champion at 3 weights, the Bam's 2. Vasyl Lomachenko has beaten 3 champions and taken belts from them.
Roman Martinez for the WBO title at super featherweight, Jorge Linares for the WBA at lightweight, and Jose Pedraza for the WBO at lightweight.
And he's been a champion at 3 weights, where Bam has only been a champion in 2. So he's got him beat in the number of divisions that he's been a champion in, and he's beaten more champions so far and taken belts from them than he has.
I don't even see Loma on this list.
It's because he's not there. Neither is Teofimo Lopez, neither is Kazuto Ioka, who I mentioned earlier, but you know who is?
Who?
Errol Spence Jr. Errol, who still hasn't rebounded off that devastating loss to Terrence Crawford over a year ago. He's not in possession of any alphabet titles at this time. He hasn't been a champion in as many weights as Vasyl Lomachenko, as Teofimo, or Kazuto.
Then why is he there?
Well, Ring Magazine's pound-for-pound list is determined by an editorial panel casting their votes. So if Errol Spence Jr. is there, it's because somebody or somebodies keep voting him in. They keep voting for him.
That's it.
Now ask yourself, does Errol Spence Jr. deserve a spot more than Kazuto Ioka, more than Vasyl Lomachenko, hell, even more than Teofimo Lopez? I know that Teofimo didn't look great this weekend, but he is more accomplished than Errol Spence Jr.
So if what the fighter manages to accomplish throughout their career is not the governing criterion for what gets a fighter a rank, then what is?
I told you what it is. It's based on an editorial panel and who they vote for. So if a fighter gets enough votes, irrespective of what his accomplishments are or what his accomplishments aren't, they'll get a rank. They'll get a spot. That's what this list is based on.
Back to Bam.
Who I'm very high on, by the way, but I don't yet have him ranked in the top 5. Now, how he can get there is if he faces the winner of this upcoming weekend's fight between Kazuto Ioka and Fernando Martinez for what will be 3 of the 4 major titles at this weight. If he fights the winner of that fight, then you're cooking with oil.
If he beats them.
Now you're cooking with rice, because he'll come that much closer to becoming this division's undisputed champion. And if he does it, and he does that, then you can wholeheartedly say that based on merit, he's in the top 5.
Because that's what the guys in the top 4 have in common. Usyk, Inoue, Canelo, Crawford.
They've all been undisputed champions, at least once. Some of them have been undisputed twice.
For Bam to be ranked alongside them, He's got to get that last brass ring. He's got to unify this division.
The saving grace is, I think he can. In men's lightweight news, continued discourse and dispute over what Gervonta Davis really did at the box office in his last fight. There was a standing bet between two Twitter users.
Face the Kid and London Runs Boxing.
Face the Kid, a friend of the channel, stated that pay-per-view would not do 500,000 buys. He tagged Mike Kopinger to the tweet, and Mike Kopinger, in so many words, said, not even close to that number.
What number?
500,000. 500,000 pay-per-view buys. What Mike Kopinger, veteran boxing scribe Mike Kopinger, is saying is that the pay-per-view didn't come close to 500,000.
Well, that's not surprising.
There have already been a few ballpark figures out there as to how the pay-per-view performed at the box office. And up until this point, the leading number has been somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200,000 pay-per-view buys via Jedi Goodman and Boxing Insider Rick Glacier. There's a new set of numbers out there, a new set from veteran boxing scribe Dan Raphael. Dan has a higher number.
500,000?
No, somewhere in between 325,000 and 350,000 pay-per-view buys per Dan Raphael. So what number should we go with? Jedi Goodman's number?
Rick Glacier's number? Mike Kopinger's guesstimate? Or Dan's guesstimate?
Which number should we go with? I think that a bit of common sense would go a long way here. I think it would, that Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin was not a fight, was not a main event that anyone was asking for. Frank Martin himself does not have a cult following. Most people don't know him.
That means that the onus to sell the pay-per-view would be on Gervonta Davis, and the baseline for a Gervonta Davis fight is usually in the neighborhood of 200,000 pay-per-view buys.
Hell, some pay-per-view appearances he's had in the past didn't even do that. Thus, it's conceivable that with Frank Martin, a guy who most people don't know, the buys would have fell somewhere in between there, 150 to 200,000.
Dan is saying it did better than that.
But Rick Glacier's not buying it. Rick Glacier reacted to the number by saying, "This is hilarious. It didn't even hit 150,000 buys. More PBC propaganda being floated to the media by PBC operatives like Leonard Ellerby."
So you don't believe that number?
I'll tell you the truth that it doesn't even matter if I believe it or not. For argument's sake, I'll go with that number. I'll go with the highest number that's out there and round up and explain to you why that's still not good. See, this was not your run-of-the-mill Gervonta Davis undercard. This was not your run-of-the-mill situation. You had newly crowned middleweight champion Carlos Adames on the undercard, and you also had David Benavidez. David Benavidez, who normally headlines his own shows. David Benavidez, who's been on pay-per-view 2 times. You had him in the co-main event.
Why is that important?
Because if you have a fighter that normally headlines his own shows in the co-main event, that makes this show that much more expensive because you've got to pay him, and obviously you have to pay Gervonta. That you tried to stack the card as best as you could, and at the very best, at the very most, all it did was just north of 300,000.
That's not good.
Not if you claim to be the face of boxing like Gervonta Davis.
Why not?
Because this is a sharp descent from what you did with Ryan Garcia. The reported buys for the Ryan Garcia fight were just north of 1 million, 1.2. Now, without Ryan, you can't even sell 500,000.
You can't even do half that number.
But you're supposed to be the face of boxing, ahead of Canelo Alvarez, who sold more pay-per-views in his last fight than you did in yours. The buy rate for Canelo versus Munguia is supposed to be in the neighborhood of 500,000 because the baseline for a Canelo Alvarez fight is 500,000.
Whether you're talking about the Bivol fight, the Ryder fight, or the more recent Munguia fight, that Canelo Alvarez is at least good for 500,000 pay-per-view buys on average.
Where you didn't hit that number in your last fight. So what exactly is supposed to make you the face of boxing more than him when he's selling more in your country than you are to more people?
More often.
So whether you go with the lowest number or the highest one, it tells the same story. That without Ryan Garcia, your numbers nosedived and you're still not selling more pay-per-views than Canelo is.
You're still not the face of boxing. That shared delusion?
It's not based on anything real. Even if you've had mild success with your inexpensive fights and your inexpensive opponents, you're still not in a place where we're supposed to call you the face of boxing. Because the face of boxing is the face of boxing because they sell more than everybody.
Everyone.
And that ain't you. With paltry numbers like this, you want a perspective? You want a perspective?
Yeah.
Here's a perspective. These numbers are in the same neighborhood as what Canelo Alvarez sold years ago with Erislandy Lara. These numbers are in the same neighborhood as what Canelo Alvarez sold with Liam Smith.
The Lara fight was more than 10 years ago. The Liam Smith fight, that was close to 10 years ago. And the numbers you're doing today...
You've got some catching up to do, my friend, if you want to become the face of boxing, because you're not there yet.
You're not selling more than everybody else in the American market. You're not on the Forbes list, and why would you be with numbers like this?
Generally speaking, the face of boxing, whoever it is, they end up on the Forbes list because their fights generate more money than everybody else's. Being the face of boxing is not some ethereal, figurative designation. It means something.
You are working within certain parameters.
And Gervonta Davis doesn't meet them. He's not up to scratch. It's as simple as that.
You had David Benavidez on the card to help you out. The Mexican monster.
And the most that did are the kind of numbers that Canelo Alvarez was doing 10 years ago.
Why is this a debate?
A hot button topic? Because of identity politics. There are those out there who are uncomfortable with the idea that the face of boxing in the sport here today is a Mexican national and not an American. There are people that are not comfortable with that.
Based on these numbers, though, there are not enough of those people making enough of a difference at the box office and at the gate to make Gervonta Davis the face of boxing.
So when you ask me, do I believe Dan Rafael's number?
No.
No, I don't. I think someone's exaggerating, fudging the numbers to make the pay-per-view seem more successful than it actually was. That's what I believe. But it doesn't even matter.
Go with the high number. Go with 325 or 350. That's still a dramatic decline from what you did with Ryan. And that's still less than what Canelo brings in.
That number still tells the same story. It's the same story whether it's 150, 200,000, or as high as 350.
Same thing.
You can't call it a solid number when you went as far as adding David Benavidez, a guy who normally headlines his own shows, to the undercard, and that's the best you could do.
Canelo did more than that with Amir Khan.
Is that the best you can do when you're supposedly the face of boxing and you have the added assistance of the quote-unquote Mexican monster?
That's it?
That's the best you can do. Well, your best ain't good enough.
You ain't the face of boxing. And no amount of broke bums online repeating themselves are gonna make you the face of boxing because they don't have the buying power.
Sorry, not sorry.